Good afternoon and welcome to the City of Rapid City Legal and Finance Committee meeting for Wednesday, December 2nd. I'd like to begin the meeting with a roll call and determination of quorum, please, Maggie. Thank you. Now's the time to adopt the agenda. If there's any additions or subtractions from the seated committee members up here, I'd like to hear from them. If not, I'll entertain a motion to adopt.
Second.
Got a motion by Lewis to adopt the agenda as presented, second by Roberts. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The agenda for today has been adopted. Now's the time for general public comment. This is a time for any of the members of our audience to address the committee today on any items that are currently not on the agenda. I currently have no speaker request forms for general public comment. Am I missing anyone in the audience that would like to talk to the committee today on any item not currently on the agenda? Seeing none, general public comment is now closed. We're moving on to public comment for items on the consent calendar, which is items 1 through 15. I currently have no speaker request forms for any of the consent items. Again, the consent items are items 1 through 15 on today's agenda. Am I missing anyone? Seeing none, public comment for consent items is now closed. The committee is now considering consent items 1 through 15. The chair would like to recognize Alderman Roberts.
I'd like to pull 2, please.
Thank you. Are there any other items to be considered separately by the committee members? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve items 1 through 15 except item number 2. I have a motion by Nordstrom. Second by Roberts to approve items 1 through 15 except item number 2. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Items 1 through 15 except item number 2 have been approved. The committee is now considering item number 2, which is being brought to us by Alderman Roberts. It's to authorize the mayor and finance officer to sign the second amendment to the lease agreement for Main Street Square. The chair would like to recognize Alderman Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before I speak on this, I do want to bring up that the Second Amendment, there is a mistake on it. Under paragraph 3 for utilities, where it says city agrees to pay for water, sewer, and electrical services. Also, the gas services should have been on there. If you look under your heading that's on your legal and finance, that was on there too. So we can get that corrected before Monday night. The reason that I brought this forward was for the long-term stability of Main Street Square. If you look at all the other parks that we have in Rapid City, typically the city of Rapid City pays for the utilities. So that's the reason, the biggest reason I brought this forward is the fact that I think the city of Rapid City should be paying for the utilities for its own park. And I think there's a lot of misconception out there in the city that Main Street Square owns Main Street Square, or Destination Rapid City owns Main Street Square. It does not. The city of Rapid City owns that park. That is a city park. And in my opinion, and talking with Destination Rapid City, for the viability in the long term of this park, I and they believe that the city should be paying the utilities on that park. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alderman Roberts. Chair would like to recognize Alderman Lewis.
Maybe? Okay. Oh, so do we need a motion to do that at this point?
There's currently no motion.
Okay, I'll make that motion to approve the...
Second.
Just for clarification, are you making the motion to amend to include gas services
Correct.
and approve?
Yes, ma'am.
I've got a motion by Lewis to amend item number 2 to include gas services and then to approve or authorize the mayor and finance officer to sign the second amendment. Second by Roberts. Any further discussion? Chair recognizes Alderman Lewis.
We're not talking about the right to bear arms, are we?
No.
Sorry, I had to say it.
Can I hit him?
Any further questions from the committee members as I bite my tongue? If not, just a real quick question. I see our Parks and Rec Director, Jeff Bigler, is in the office. Jeff, if you wouldn't mind stepping to the podium, please. Thank you, Jeff. And Alderman Roberts did an excellent job saying that Destination Rapid City has been instrumental in preparing this, and I know that they've also visited with you as well. Just to get the clarification for the budget purposes, I believe this is going to go into effect for 2016, is that correct?
That's correct.
And does the Parks and Recreational budget already have the funds available to offset this, or will there be a supplemental appropriation coming?
A supplemental would be necessary into the parks budget. The budget that was presented and approved does not include this additional money.
And do you have a rough idea, including the gas services, what the total amount roughly estimated will be for 2016?
Well, if this cover sheet is correct, we're looking at $66,835.39, and that cover sheet does include the gas estimate as well.
Thank you. So with that being said, is your recommendation for those funds to come out of undesignated cash for the supplemental appropriation?
I think I would have to defer to our finance officer for the best location from where to draw those additional funds.
Thank you, Mr. Bigler. Pauline, if you wouldn't mind.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It would either be coming from undesignated cash, or the council could choose at the time to reduce the council contingency by that amount as well. But either way, it would, if you needed something else in the future and the contingency money wasn't there, then it would come out of the undesignated cash.
All right. Thank you, Pauline. Thank you, Jeff. Chair would like to recognize Alderwoman Drew.
Jeff, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Now, as I understand this agreement that we'll have, I didn't see it really written down, but that the Destination Rapid City folks will continue with their cleanup efforts, is that right?
Correct. Yes.
And does that mean every day of the year, throughout the entire year? I mean,
Yes, as I understand, that will not change with this amendment.
So that's kind of what we were doing, is kind of making a trade-off here in a way. We'd take our
Correct.
responsibilities, which are ours,
Right.
and then that they would go ahead and continue their cleanup and their great care for the downtown area during their time periods. Yeah, okay.
Correct.
Is that written down anywhere?
I don't know if it is or not. I don't think it has been formalized in a
Okay.
written agreement.
I don't like oral agreements that go on forever, so we'll probably have to write that down somewhere, so thank you.
You bet.
And Mr. Bigler, to follow up with Alderwoman Drew's question, will that amendment or will that write-up be available for Monday night, or is City Council simply approving what's been attached as far as an agreement?
City Council would be approving just what's been attached. I think if there's another agreement that needs to be put in place between Destination Rapid City and the Parks Department, that's something we'll work on.
All right. Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, we do have a motion to approve. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We're now on to the non-consent items. This is a time for public comment on the non-consent items, which are items 16 through 19 on today's agenda. I currently have no speaker request forms for non-consent items. Am I missing anyone? Seeing none, public comment is now closed. We are on to item number 16. Item number 16 is a presentation for the project as far as an update and funding update for Soccer Rapid City. If you could please state your name and your affiliation to the city for the record, and we are all ears.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Roger Tellinghusen on behalf of Soccer Rapid City. Thank you for this time. Our purpose is really twofold. We haven't been back before the city for a while now to give you an update as to the progress that we're making at the soccer complex, and I'd like to do that this morning and then also talk about some funding matters. But to start out with, I've brought some photos of the complex, and I'm sorry to say the photos, the Elmo or whatever this is called doesn't do the photos justice, but this is just a photo taken of the, from the highway or the entrance off of the highway looking north. You can see the gazebos, which are in varying states of completion, and the concession stand, which is also nearing completion. Just a reminder, the complex will have 12 fields available, and it's impossible to show in a photograph like this all of the fields very clearly, so you'll just kind of have to use your imagination. I really wanted to show you more of the buildings that were being constructed on this project. The next photo is just a little closer view of the concession stand. And the crow, what you see up on top is the crow's nest, which will allow for announcing games on the championship fields, which are actually to the north of this building, side by side. And they'll be the two fields that have the electronic scoreboards and such, and championship games will be conducted on those two fields. But that's the purpose of the crow's nest. Have another picture of, again, the gazebos and the concession stand, but it also shows the maintenance building on the other end. It doesn't show up very well. Oh, there we go. It's this building right here to store the lawnmowers and the goals and the things like that that we'll want to keep in out of the weather and out in the off season. My last photo that I'll show right today is it shows the parking lot, which this is a parking spaces for 600 vehicles. This, of course, was all part of the city's original funding proposal, and we think it looks pretty dramatic. You can see the other gazebos on the other end. There's a total of 8 gazebos that will be available for teams and spectators to use for meetings or lunches or things like that when there's tournaments and games going on. The other part that I wanted to share with you today, and each of you have a copy of this handout, and I'll just put the front page of it up so you'll know what to be looking for, but this is what we call kind of our wish list, if you will. It's also what we've been using for purposes of soliciting donors to the project. And as you can see, we call this Dakota Fields Dreams to Reality. That's just a working name. Oh, you have your copies. I can put this back up though. There we go. Naming opportunities. And in the left-hand column is what we call the opportunity, which are a variety and numerous different components to this project that we have tried to solicit donations from donors in exchange for them having an opportunity to have their donation or their name recognized at that location. We've taken a list of donors periodically back to Parks and Recreation for approval. I have another list that'll be ready to go here relatively soon with those names that have not yet been presented to them for approval. All of the naming opportunities, when we're very clear about this in the donor agreements that we ask people to sign, have attached to it a copy of the city's naming policy. So every donor is made aware of what the city's naming policies are, and their donations and naming rights, if you will, are subject to the city's naming policy. Hence the reason we take all of these back to the Park and Rec Board for their review and approval. But what's really, I think, noteworthy about this particular document is I'm going to take the last page and put the bottom of it up, but it shows the total amount that's been raised in pledges is $2,162,566. That's as of December 1st, 2015. A part of that, and I also want to mention that this donated amount does not include any value for the actual land donation from Doyle Estes and Kathy Johnson, the 80 acres that they donated, which would, of course, would be a significant amount in and of itself. It does include some in-kind donations. The in-kind donations that are included within that $2,100,000+ figure actually total $205,066 as of yesterday, and thus the cash donations actually are $1,957,500. And I would mention that all of our donors are given the opportunity to pay their donation over a 5-year period. A large number of them have elected to do that. And as I said, we have a donor agreement that each of them is asked to sign, and it spells out what their total donation is, whether they're paying it over a period of time, and if so, what the periodic payments are and when they're due. Some have opted to pay it all up front, which we appreciate because we have bills coming in, and thus far we've been able to stay current. But That brings me to the last part of my presentation today, and that's a funding request. If you could turn, please, to the last handout that you have. Looks like this. It's the budget for Dakota Fields Dreams to Reality. At the top, we have the Dakota Commons, which I showed you pictures of that, which is the concession stands and the gazebos. There's a meeting room in there. It includes the maintenance building, the sponsorship signage, and the donor board, scoreboards for the 2 championship fields, bleachers, and then consulting miscellaneous expenses. We've budgeted $1,410,754 for that. We will stay within that budget. The largest single component to that part of the budget is the concession stand. It's just shy of $1 million to build the concession stand and the gazebos. A little side note, when we were originally putting together our wish list, if you will, we were contemplating a cost to build that concession stand of $250,000. And as time has shown, we were woefully short on that estimate. And costs have gone up over and above what was originally anticipated. But nonetheless, we've raised the funds for that. Lights for 8 fields, which includes a $50,000 donation that's been awarded to Soccer Rapid City by the United States Soccer Foundation, will run right at $1.1 million. That number is probably just a little bit high, because as we get into the process of actually signing agreements for the lights, we're hopeful that some of the local work that has to be done to put the lights on those 8 fields can be done in kind. And so we may have some cost savings there, but until we know that for sure, we've included the entire amount that we believe would be otherwise necessary to light up 8 fields. I've also included what the city has generously offered and put into this project thus far. They've budgeted $4.4 million. So a total project cost of $6.9 million. And then the bottom part of this document kind of sets out what our request is. You can see the total cash pledged to date. Now that November 24th date is actually it should be December 1st. I didn't get that changed on here when I printed the final draft of this. But otherwise, the numbers of actual cash and the amount of actual in-kind donations are accurate. But our request to the city is for an additional $550,000, which would pay for 1/2 the cost of lighting the 8 fields. We believe that the city would be able to fund that with $400,000 in new funds, and $150,000 is estimated to be available from the contingency fund that was built into the $4.4 million original budget of the city. This number has been provided to me by Rod Johnson out of Public Works. So we're working with a number of $100,000 available from the contingency fund, but then RJ contacted me and suggested that it looked more like $150 was going to be available out of that contingency amount. So the other part of our request is to borrow money from the city to be repaid out of pledges. I have 2 borrowing requests. I broke it out into 2 requests. One is to borrow the other half of the cost of the 8 lights, in other words, $550,000. The other borrowing request, and this will require a little explanation, but it's for $250,000 to purchase the donor signage that will go into this complex. And I apologize, I didn't bring our large spiral notebook of all of the different signage that will be used in this complex, but it's very professionally done, and I know our donors are going to be very pleased, but it's not without a considerable expense, as you can see. I would mention that $250,000 that you see here, that is included in this $1,410,754 that's budgeted. So we would like to borrow that money from the city so we can put the signage in before we open the complex this next spring, but it would all be repayable to the city out of the pledges as we receive them. The last handout that I've provided you is a spreadsheet. And I know it's very difficult for the audience to read this, and I apologize, but each of you should have your own copy of it. It's a spreadsheet that shows, again, the donors on the left-hand side. I have to take it off here and pull it up myself. It shows their total pledge amount, and then it shows the period of time over which their pledges is payable. So it will give us essentially kind of like a bond ladder. It will show the amount of money that we will receive over the course of the next 2, 3, and 4 years from our donors. And it would be out of those pledges as they come in that we would be able to repay what amounts to $700,000 or $800,000 that we'd like to borrow from the city to complete this project. And the last thing I want to say before I would stand for questions is our fundraising group, 2 of whom are here today, Paul Bradsky and Donnie Patton, have worked very, very hard to go out and raise money for this complex. And I'm very proud of them, as I think this city should be. They deserve an immense amount of credit for raising this $2.1 million that's been raised thus far. And I'm kind of a newcomer to Rapid City, but I've been at enough of your meetings and listened to the proposals of the different 2012 Vision Fund projects. I think this may be one of the few, if not the only, project that has really gone out and raised serious money privately to help fund what will be truly a remarkable complex available for the kids and young adults here in Rapid City. So thank you, Madam Chair. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any committee members have any questions? Chair would like to recognize Alderman Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd like to make a motion to fund the project as per the request I need help identifying a source for the $400,000 to allow them to borrow the money and or repay it. I'm not sure I actually would do that request, but not part of the motion. But
If you could, then let's just go ahead and turn that question over to Pauline to help you form your motion before I ask for a second. Pauline, I know that there were going to be questions not only from Alderman Lewis, but probably from all of us up here. The assumption is that you have been in talks with how this would be funded or potential funding sources?
That is correct. I've been included in some conversations. First of all, sales tax is coming in higher than was originally projected 5 years ago, and that is always helpful. The projection was 3% off of the 2014 projection, which was low, and so the cumulative effect, we should have at least the extra $400,000 in sales tax to cover that new money. In addition, we have some projects that have been completed that we had extra money budgeted for that too, so we could reallocate that from the vision plan for the 5-year plan.
Is it the new money or the $400,000 that you mentioned, as well as the projects that have done? Is it all out of the vision money that you're referring to as a funding source, or are there 2 different funding sources you're referring to?
It would all be out of the vision fund. The city's portion for half the lights, though, would come from the new money and some of those projects that have come in under budget. And I apologize, this is the first I knew they were going to come for the $250,000. But the other $500,000 at the time, it was based on projects that we have on the plan, but that have been delayed, and they're still working on getting things in line, such as the ATA, and there's some other projects in the 4th set of projects too that are the timing of it would allow for us to upfront the money and still have revenues coming in next year, where if they proceeded with their project, we would have that money still available for them.
And the goal would be then to set up a repayment for this loaned money to Saco Rapid City to have the money back available, and it would go directly back into the vision fund at that point?
That is correct. And I believe the conversation was to do something like we loaned ourselves at I think it was a 3% interest rate for the other half of the lights. So yeah, it would all go back into the vision fund. still be eligible for the next round of projects. And so I guess my request, if this is what the council or this committee wishes to do, is to actually make it a two-part motion, which to authorize the allocation of funding for half of the lights, in addition to authorizing staff to work with the soccer folks to draw up an agreement on the loans.
That was actually what I was going to say. So that would be my motion, if I can get a second. Okay, in fact, keep the floor.
I have a motion by Alderman Lewis to draft up the motion per what Ms. Sumption had stated, and the second is by Alderman Roberts.
I still have the floor.
And Alderman Lewis, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I guess I really appreciate Sauk Rapid City's efforts to raise close to over $2 million, basically, and you don't see that very often in any of these projects that come forward, and their willingness to actually borrow money as opposed to just ask for it is even a better process. I like that as well. So that nothing that's currently on the books will be affected by that. So I think it's a win-win for everybody. We'll still get the projects that are supposed to be out there. They're supposed to be coming just a little delayed, and we'll also get the lighting, which is probably pretty important to a championship soccer field, I imagine. If we're going to spend that kind of money, we should probably do it right. And so I definitely appreciate everybody's hard work and support, and thank you very much.
Thank you. And if I may impose myself to ask Mr. Joel Ledeen a question before we go on to the other seated committee members here. As far as the agreement, Joel, since it sounds like, and I'm just asking for your interpretation, this would be the city loaning itself money, and it would actually go through the city departments. How does that work for the payment back from the pledges?
Well, I think we would want to have an agreement with Sauk Rapid City where they would commit those pledges to us. I was planning on trying to grab Mr. Tellinghusen before he leaves and before the meeting's over, and I have a few questions for him on how he thinks this is going to work, and then we can put something together. But I think we will need an agreement with them. However, I think, and I don't know that it matters, but it looks like they have pledges, but there's probably going to be no way to really effectively secure that payment if the payments weren't made for some reason or something happened. So you just need to probably be aware of that. I think if the donations come in and everything goes as planned, they would, I have no doubt they're going to pay the money. But if for some reason something happened, I mean, it's not like we can have a lien or foreclose on it or anything. So just something for you to keep in mind as we move forward.
And then, Joel, could you just provide clarification? Is this setting a precedent in the city, or has this been done before in the past?
You know, as Mr. Tellinghusen pointed out, I can't remember a group that probably participating in a project that has been able to raise this amount of money. I cannot recall a situation where we have loaned money in this fashion waiting to be repaid by donations to another group. Doesn't mean it hasn't happened, but I can't think of a situation. But as you've pointed out, we do ultimately own the property, so if we expend this money on this facility, at the end of the day, whether or not we're repaid back, we own the facility and the infrastructure that we're paying to install.
So therefore, you don't see any legal problems in setting up an agreement and forecasting this out?
No, I mean, if you look at the whole project, I mean, everyone recognized from the beginning that what the end product would be if there wasn't private contributions and support to the facility would not be the same as everyone wanted to see at the end of the day. So, I mean, we've gotten to this place in this project because of the contribution of Sauk Rapid City and private individuals and businesses in the community that have donated money to make this a better facility. So, you know, it certainly just helps you in deciding whether or not that's, obviously the city has a lot of needs for funding, and because this has a good potential of getting paid back, probably increases, makes more sense as an investment. Use that money twice, essentially.
Thank you. Chair would like to recognize Alderwoman Drew.
I have a couple of questions for Mr. Tellinghusen. And I do know of projects because I have a history with Vision, and the Rapid City Arts Council raised $3.8 million for the doll project, and also Main Street Square. I don't know the exact numbers there, but it was an incredible partnership. And private and public partnerships are one of the best ways to leverage the vision money. So congratulations on a job well done. A couple of questions. You plan on opening this spring. Do you have a date on that?
We do not have a date yet. We're looking probably in the May timeframe. We haven't scheduled a grand opening yet. Kind of wanting to make sure everything's done and in place before we do that, but that's our expectation, is this spring. Alderman Drew?
Do the soft opening first. You know.
Okay.
And you have any games scheduled?
No, not yet. Not
Will
yet.
there be a charge for people to use those fields? Is that one of the ways you're going to generate income?
I have to plead ignorance a little bit when it comes to actual scheduling for the fields. That will actually be handled by Soccer Rapid City. Our fundraising group is an adjunct to Soccer Rapid City. All of the donor agreements are in the name of Soccer Rapid City and the donors. And I wish to point out that our agreements provide that if a donor fails to complete their pledge, their naming opportunity is taken away from them.
You take their name away?
Correct. Take their name off the whatever's their name appears on at the field, which frankly then makes it available to resell to somebody else.
True.
So
True. And let's see here. Are there plans in the mix somewhere? And I know I'm talking to a fundraiser now, not the operational people, but for operational funding, because that seems to be where we get in a bit of mud. You know, we get these nice places done, and then how do we do the operational funding?
that I can only speak from what I understand to be Soccer Rapid City's past practice. They fund their operations through the registration fees for the kids that sign up. I mean, they now have a budget for the fields that they've been using of in excess of $100,000 a year, is my understanding, for mowing. And I mean, they pay for the mowing and all of that stuff. So, yes, they're aware of their maintenance requirements and obligations with respect to this new complex. And I know one of the things that they're hoping to do is to host more tournaments, regional tournaments, which are another source of revenue for them. And the fundraising crew has also identified some areas within the complex that might lend themselves to recurring revenue in terms of advertising. And so those combinations of things we are expecting will increase their overall operating budget such that they'll not need to come back to the city for additional funding requests like I'm doing right now.
Well, thank you for your presentation and for a project that really is worthy of the name Vision. And best of luck, and I will be supporting this motion.
Thank you.
Chair would like to recognize Alderman Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Don't sit down. Just one more question. So are you wrapping up your fundraising now? Or are you going to continue fundraising?
No, we are continuing to fundraise, yes.
Okay.
And there's any number of little things that can be used out there at this complex. And so I'm kind of speaking for Paul and Donnie because they really have been two of the three engines that have been driving this fundraising effort. But as you can see from our donor opportunities naming list or naming opportunity list, there's a number of other things yet that are available for donors to pledge their support to and have their name on. So it's my expectation that we're still continuing forward with fundraising.
Exactly. That's one of the questions I had, because I'd noticed there was still quite a bit of opportunity left there for people out in the community. And it looks like there's a couple of motels that could have their names on here. But I do want to thank you two especially for everything you've done, Don and Paul. So you guys have done a wonderful job. You definitely went beyond my expectations on this. I know that I won't say shocked, maybe a little surprised, but I think you guys did a wonderful job. This is such a wonderful opportunity for Rapid City that us investing a little bit more money, as long as it's coming out of the Vision Fund, I have absolutely no problem with, and I think that it's going to pay huge dividends going into the future. So I just want to thank you all for everything that you've done, and everything that you do for Rapid. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chair would like to recognize Alderman Nordstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Probably a question for the City Attorney's Office, please. Joel, we're going through this agreement as an MOU. Am I understanding that correctly, with this Vision Fund transfers and everything?
I think, yeah, I would say, again, we would want to do something in writing, since since Sauk Rapid City doesn't have the money in hand and is essentially pledging to provide us their future pledge payments.
Yeah, I see an MOU probably the better instrument rather than a contract. But anyway, that's
Well,
your
legally, they're
option.
basically the same thing.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. The other point that I have for you, Joel, is that is the MOU with the Soccer Association. I know that's separate from this group here, since it's going to be operated by by the soccer group itself. But do we need an MOU with them similar to the other ones that we have with other government or city entities that we have in place right now?
I think we already have an MOU with Sauk Rapid City for the new
Okay.
fields.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Chair would like to recognize Alderman Lewis.
Just wanted to point out once again for Alderwoman Drew's sake, no, this is not an operating cost thing. I think the soccer's done a pretty good job of taking care of their fields at this point and operating their organization. So I don't foresee them asking us for money for operating. I don't think baseball does or anybody does at this point. I think it's mostly just infrastructure stuff, and that's what we're trying to take care of here. So once again, there's like 2,000 kids or so that play soccer, so it's a pretty big sport. And the economic impact, I can assure you, when you go to a field somewhere else, you take everybody and your grandma, and you spend about $1,000 a weekend no matter what you do. So we're gonna open this thing up. It's gonna be huge for the city and huge for soccer. So thank you for your support.
Thank you. And before the vote, just to want to clarify, the motion on the floor is to approve the funding as requested, but also to approve staff working with the fundraising and soccer association to set up that agreement in how to repay the requested money back through the pledges. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 17, I'd like to recognize Mr. Pettijohn, and if you could approach the podium, state your name and your affiliation to the city, please, and you brought forward this item. We'd like to hear from you on this item.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ted Pettijohn. I'm one of the owners of Mobile Home Park. It's Country Village South. It's located at 1980 Seeger Drive. And so I don't know how much you know about the circumstances or the details surrounding my request, so I assume you want me to explain
Please,
why
sir.
I'm here, what I'm trying to do. Okay. First of all, we're thrilled that the City of Rapid City decided to improve Seeger Drive and extend water and sewer in front of our properties and improve the street and the pavement. It's a beautiful project, and we're very grateful and very excited that that has happened. And it is our wish to connect to city sewer. Country Village South is not in the city limits at this time. I think the city limits go right down the middle of Seeger, so the people on the south side were in the city limits, and this property on the north side was not. So, of course, in order to connect to city sewer, we have to be, the property has to be annexed into the city. So we've been working over the past few months with city engineering department on this project and planning the hookup. We understand what our connection fees are going to be. And in fact, we own a property just adjacent to Country Village South, another mobile home park that is in the city, and we have started a project now doing the infrastructure work inside the parks to connect to the city. With, in fact, the line begins at the Prairie Acres Park and proceeds through Country Village South and then connects to the city sewer on the street. So community planning advised us of how we go through the annexation procedures, and they gave us, you know, the petitions that we would need to go out and have the residents and the property sign, and we got a roll of the registered voters that are in the property. And the roll indicated that there were 77 registered voters in the property. So we went out and started going door to door, collecting signatures from the registered voters in the property. So of those 77 that were on the rolls, 48 have been verified to be no longer residents in the park. And some of them have been gone for more than a decade, for a very long time. And so we did find 29 of those residents that were on the roll that are still in the park. We were able to contact 22 of these and obtain their signature. We also, going door to door, discovered 10 registered voters who were not on that roll of 77. And we got their signatures as well. So we found 39 registered voters on the property. Okay? And we collected signatures of 32 of those, which is 82%. And by the way, I understand that the statute requires for voluntary annexation that we have to have the approval of 75% of the residents that are there. So we did get the approval of 82% of the registered voters that we could find on the property. We had one person who would not sign the petition out of all the people that we contacted. But the rolls, you know, these 48 people, we're not going to find them. And so, you know, even we got 82%. If we got 100% signatures of the registered voters that are on the property, we still would not reach that 75% threshold. And I had conversations. I contacted I forget what department it is in the county who handles voter registration, and they say they understand that. They can't remove voters from the roll even though they don't live there. That's not really a viability. I had conversations with the city attorney's office, and the state statute is what it is. And so I think we've come to the conclusion, along with the city attorney's office, that it's just not possible for us to be a part of the city through a voluntary annexation. So upon the advice of the city attorney's office, I'm appearing here before you today and requesting that the city annex us involuntarily.
Thank you, sir. If you wouldn't mind standing by, Chair would like to recognize Alderman Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Pettyjohn, that office is the auditor's office at the county. I ran for that position a year and a half ago, so I know exactly what you're talking about. When I was running for that position, we found hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of registered voters that were not in these addresses, and many, many, many people that had been deceased for many years. And I'll tell you just a quick story why I started that was I thought I would check on somebody that I knew in my ward as a councilman that had been deceased for 10 years. And I wanted to see if they were still on the voter registration list, and they were. So I know exactly what you're talking about. And also I'm helping some residents right now out at Big Sky on the east side of town to get annexed in too, and they're having the exact same problem. Out of the 75% of registered voters, so far I believe they've found and I can't give the exact numbers, but I know that there was around 8 people that were dead on that one. So it's a real big problem that we have to work with the state and the county to take care of. But it sounds to me like you would have the amount of people, and I would have a question for Joel Landine, if you wouldn't mind, Madam Chair.
Sure.
Mr. Landine, how do we start the process on this to involuntarily annex out there? And can we make that motion to start that from here?
I think, yes, that's what we're looking for is direction to staff. We don't generally proceed with an involuntary annexation unless the council directs us to. So we're seeking that. So if you recommend for the council on Monday night that they begin the involuntary annexation process, then planning staff, unfortunately, involuntary annexation has some hurdles that have to be cleared, and so it's a little more complicated than a voluntary annexation. And so staff will, if you give that direction, staff will start working on the necessary and do it as quickly as possible and get it on an agenda so we can complete the annexation.
I can't make that motion because I've already spoke, but if somebody will make that motion, I will definitely second it.
Thank you. Chair would like to recognize Alderman Nordstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's my motion to start the annexation process.
I've got a motion by Nordstrom to request staff to start on the involuntary annexation of Country Village South Mobile Home Park located at 1980 Seeger Drive, second by Roberts. Alderman Nordstrom, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Pettyjohn, sorry, I know somebody else by that similar name. I'm very enthused about this annexation, primarily because of the lagoons up there going away, and hopefully you have some plans for the actual demolition of them, and so they would be reclaimed and et cetera. So I'm going to be obviously supporting this motion and looking forward to your annexation. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
I'd like to respond.
Yeah, we're eager to be done with the lagoons as well. So yeah, we're looking forward to it, and so the lagoons will be ultimately reclaimed. You know, there's procedures. I think the DENR has guidelines and procedures for reclamation of those, and so we're aware of that. Yes.
Seeing no further discussion, I'd like to pose a question to the city attorney as well. Joel, on an involuntary annexation, because Alderman Roberts had brought up like the, east of town, are there any hurdles? You mentioned there are a couple of hurdles. Is there any hurdles that would, like by petition, that would stop this process or anything? Or is it just administrative hurdles that just need to be met and passed?
Administrative is what I was thinking of. The biggest one is that there has to be an annexation report prepared. Because this is not a situation, traditionally when you're talking involuntary annexation, there's generally somebody opposed to it. So you really have to probably invest a lot of time in the annexation report. I would say because this is a small area and there isn't going to probably be any opposition to it, hopefully that would expedite the annexation report. But it's still going to take a staff person time to prepare it. So.
All right, thank you, and thank you for that clarification. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, ladies and
And Mr. Pettyjohn, just so you know, this will go with a recommendation to City Council Monday night to authorize this process to be started, and if that passes Monday night, it'll be in the process.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. That's okay. We still have 3 committee members left. And so we're going on to item number 18, which is a resolution adopting a city fee policy to be used for amending and adding fees in the city fee resolution. And the chair would like to recognize Mr. Brett Limbaugh for a brief explanation. I believe this is just really cleaning up some housekeeping items. Is that correct, Mr. Limbaugh?
Yeah, that's correct. We had a Compass audit performed a little over a year ago, and within that audit, they recommended consolidating all our fees into a single fee resolution so that when the council wants to raise, lower, or add fees, they're all in one spot. It's also easier for the public because they only have to look in one spot to find the fees. Another recommendation within the Compass report was to put together a formal fee policy. So if departments or divisions want to add or raise or lower fees, there is a study that needs to be done. And there are 9 items within this fee resolution for a department or division to look at when they're proposing to add or raise a fee. Some of those would be looking at, what are the direct and indirect costs of the fee, who does the fee service, What's the cost recovery goal? Are we trying to capture 100% of the cost of doing business, or are we subsidizing it, and to what effect are we doing that? We would look at the service level demand, how many people are actually requesting the service, and are we the best provider, or is there an external organization that would be better fit to handle that function? We would look at fee comparisons to other jurisdictions, county and city. We would look at the history of the fee, when it was adopted, when was it last updated. We would take stakeholder input if necessary. We would need to cite the authority for what gives us the authorization to request the fee. Generally, that's either a resolution or something within the municipal code giving us direct authority to charge a fee. And then finally, we would look at the fee collection methods. So where is the fee collected? Is it put into a segregated account, or is it going into the general fund? Those are the types of questions that the division managers would need to ask, and they would bring the results of those questions to you so that you would have something to look at rather than just the number. So we have one more item to complete, and that is a survey that we'll be sending out to our several division managers and city stakeholders, asking them which fees would need to be added, raised, lowered, or eliminated. So when we get that fee survey back, we'll be coming back to you with that list and requesting authorization to go forward and do the full evaluation. So what you have before you today is just really essentially the policy for our examination.
All right, thank you. Chair would like to recognize Alderman Nordstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, if I may make that motion to start that resolution or adopt that resolution.
Got a motion to approve the resolution.
Second.
Second by Drew. Alderman Nordstrom, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The most favorable part of this component is that I'm looking at is the rationale behind the numbers that we're going to be reviewing. When the fees come in, and most of the time we were just kind of looking at a number, as Mr. Limbaugh suggested, is that there's no real rationale behind why that number is established for what it is. And also the recovery rate is also a very significant portion that I'd like to take a look at as well. So I'm very appreciative of all this information coming forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 19 is the introduction and first reading of ordinance number 6087 to create a vice chairperson for the Capital Improvements Committee by amending subsection 3.16.090A of the Rapid City Municipal Code.
Move to approve.
I've got a motion by Drew to approve.
Second.
Second by Nordstrom. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Move to adjourn.
I've got a motion by Drew to adjourn, second by Nordstrom. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.